All right, I think we'll get started. Hi, everybody. My name is Johnny Conran, and I'm managing partner at Joseph Mews. And it's a pleasure to launch our fourth webinar series of the year, which is great. So, as we mentioned before, we're going to be doing one of these every single month. And the whole premise of this idea was to listen to our investors and listen to you guys and understand what it is that you want to hear from us and how we can sort of add value to your investment journey. And when we sent out these questions, and we do this at every webinar that we do, we ask, what else can we advise you on, and what would be useful? And one of the most resounding answers was about how to build a portfolio. How can I maximize and scale my returns? And we thought there's no better way to answer that than not only by introducing our chairman, Andy Foote, who is obviously a well-renowned figure in our industry, but also has done this himself as a consumer. So being able to give advice from two angles, I think, is going to be really useful for us. So it's a great honor to have Andy on with us today. So we're going to hear from him shortly. Before we start, I'm just going to give a little bit of an overview about Joseph Mews. I know some of you already know us, some of you don't. So I'm just going to touch on that very briefly. And then I'll pass over to Andy. And then at the end, we will be taking questions as well. So please do, if you look at the bottom, I think we're all pretty used to Zoom by now. There's a Q&A section. If you type in questions there, then we will address them at the end of the webinar. So please do anything that you want to know, just pop it in there and we'll get to it at the end. So can we go to the next slide, please? So there is Andy on your screen now. And this is the history of our business, really. Andy started the company back in 2001. And the whole premise of starting this business was to add a customer service element wherever you are in the world to being able to invest in UK real estate. So this kind of transformed into Andy starting a distribution arm for one of the largest developers in the UK now and building a huge portfolio for them. But the main premise was, whether you're living in Dubai or South Africa or Hong Kong or in the UK, that you have access to a company that can help you and help hold your hand, from the mortgages to the legal firms that you need to deal with, to actually renting and managing the property. And although it's a bit more common practice nowadays, it really wasn't back then. So it was much of a sort of pioneer move when it started. Now, as we are the Joseph Mews Property Group, what we've managed to establish is a bit more variety in our offering. So again, sort of touching on why we're here today, is the fact that we wanted to be a bit more versatile with what we could offer you, the investor. Rather than just working with one developer, it made a lot more sense for us to be able to partner with various developers that, from our experience and from Andy's experience, we know we can trust, and in turn, our investors can trust. So that's where we are today. And that obviously allows for you to build a portfolio in a far easier manner when you've got more options and more variety. So we go to the next slide, please. In terms of our history, what we've done, 3,500 yearly units that we've marketed, sold and delivered, just under £600 million worth as Joseph Mews. So it's a big track record, 34 developments that we've been a part of. All of these are in the UK in varying locations that we see fit for investment purposes. So we've got a great track record, and that's obviously important when you're dealing with a business that is done, tried and tested, and knows the process. Next slide, please. We mentioned obviously now the fact that we have various different partners. Again, one of Andy's sort of strengths and his experience in the market and from ours overseas is knowing who we can deal with and who we should be dealing with, and I guess more importantly, who we shouldn't. And so partnering with the right developers and offering products from developers that we know have great track records, that we know aren't going to let our investors down, is obviously paramount to the whole premise of our business. And so it's obviously a great privilege to be able to work with some of the best in the country. Next slide, please. I mentioned it before, the process, if you're based 3,000 miles away from the property itself, it can be tricky knowing, okay, how am I going to rent this property? Who's going to manage it? Who do I speak to for a mortgage? There's so many different boxes that need to be ticked, and it can be really daunting, particularly if you're not from the UK and you don't travel there often, or you don't travel there at all. So that's something that we've really put an effort into establishing over the years, is having these partners from legal entities, as I said, law firms. We have great mortgage brokers we work with, whether you're based in South Africa, Dubai, Hong Kong, as I mentioned, anywhere in the world, there will be options for you. and we guide you through that. So Joseph Mews' involvement in selling property isn't to sell a property and say, good luck and sail into the sunset. It's about what we're talking about today. It's about how can we help our clients maximize their returns from building a portfolio and scaling and being as efficient as possible when it comes to their investment. And so that's exactly why we're here today. So you always deal with Joseph Mews from the reservation process beyond and into your future purchases. Next slide, please. So just to give you one quick example before I hand over to Andy, this is a case study of a development that we actually just completed at the beginning of this year. We go to the next slide. The reason that I'm using it is because of what we've sort of achieved here, I should say. I mean, we delivered this, we sold it out in 8 months, 12 months ahead of completion. And so, you know, selling off plan, our clients were buying into a development that we were just showing them CGIs, beautiful pictures of what this development was going to be. So if you've never done it before, it can be quite daunting. But as I mentioned, the whole premise of Joseph Mews is that we only deal with the best developers, people that we know we can trust, that they're going to deliver outstanding quality that lasts the test of time. You know, this investing in property, as we'll come on to now, is a long-term game. This is about the future. This is about creating passive income. This is about creating generational wealth, retirement planning. And the only way that you can do that is if you buy quality. If you buy something cheap and not great, then it's not going to stand the test of time. And even if the value has gone up, you're not going to have an exit because nobody's going to want to buy it. So this is a great example. If you go to the next slide, of what we had achieved, the quality is unbelievable. I mean, obviously these are real photos of the actual development itself. It looks absolutely fantastic, almost far superior to the CGIs that we even showed clients before. And most importantly, they've all rented incredibly easily. The yields are really high, and it's in a beautiful location right in the heart of the second city. Off the back of this, if we go to the next slide, please. Off the back of its quality, it's actually won 3 first place awards in the UK Property Awards. Amazing. You know, the fact that we always talk about only dealing with the best, for sort of us to give, you know, to highlight that. It won the best architecture for multiple residents in the whole of the UK, the best multiple residents in the West Midlands, and even got shortlisted for the best in Europe. So we only want to deal with these kind of standards and property that's, as I say, is going to last and give you the best investment return. Next slide, please. Again, 5-star reviews on Google, you know how important those are, and a lot of happy customers from all around the world. Lots are in the UK, lots are overseas, and many of them flew over for handover day. You don't have to be there physically. We can do things remotely, but it was great to see so many happy investors that had bought something, as I said, that didn't exist, but now is a fantastic investment for their futures. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned before, if you do have any questions as Andy's going through things, then please do ask. And without further ado, I think I'm handing over to Andy now. So again, just to introduce Andy, he is the chairman of Joseph Mews. He founded the original business, and he's going to talk us through the concept of scaling and how he's done it himself. So I'm going to hand over to Andy now, and then we'll take some questions at the end.
Okay, thanks, Johnny. Eventually I got on. Right, thanks for inviting me today to speak, Johnny. Appreciate it. And the idea is that hopefully anybody listening will pick up 1 or 2 useful tips, a little golden nugget of information which will help you make decisions going forward if you're thinking about investing in property. As Johnny says, if you've got any questions, please type them in and we'll come to them later. And in fact, we will ask you a question shortly, a poll question for the people listening. It'll be interactive, and let's see what comes from that. So let's move on. As a young man, I started investing in property, and that was because I was told that the world of pensions was changing, and you've got to create your own passive income for when you're looking to retire or semi-retire in the future. Back in the day, there were things like full salary pensions where you retired and whatever your salary was on your retirement, that's what you receive for the rest of your life. Well, those days have gone. As I say, the world of pensions have changed, and now we have to look after ourselves. So as soon as you can start investing and building a pot, whatever kind of investment pot that is, I would recommend you do, because the longer you're in an investment, in theory, it should be worth more at the end when you come to draw upon it. Let's see what we've got on the next slide. So these three things, pretty basic stuff. What I always say about property, what I did was the first thing is you don't lose any money. You buy off plan because you want to get in first, and you want, ideally, you're going to buy at a price which is lower than the market value of when it's ready in, say, 1 or 2 years' time. But you don't want to choose a developer who goes bust and you lose your deposit. So the first thing is you choose the right developer, the right partner, the right agent, like Joseph Mews, somebody with a track record. And the second thing is you want to be, it's not timing the market, it's timing the market. We know that the values of property go up over time. We don't know if it's going to be 5, 10, 15, 20 years, but we know in general, and there's a slide later which explains the history of what's actually happened. And so that's the long-term vision. And I think I've already, the risk tolerance really is about the rental. You need sustainable tenant demand. So you need to pick a location where you've got young professionals, management, people with disposable income who will always want to rent your apartment. Because having an apartment with costs like mortgage and service charge and no rent and voids is not a good place to be. I've been there, and you want to avoid that at all costs. What's the next one? Here we go. This is what's happened over the last kind of 40 odd years. You can see those vertical dotted lines. This was when property prices kind of doubled. So it used to be every 5 years, 6 years, 13 years, 14 years. You know, we've chosen 15 years, but who knows? It could be 20, but it could be 10. Interesting thing about when you get into property investment, it's nice and simple. That's why I got in. Bricks and mortar, we understand that. I don't really understand crypto. I feel like it's a bit of a gamble. Stocks and shares, a bit more complicated, but bricks and mortar to me was nice and simple. As long as I get a really well-built apartment in the right location that will always be rented, I can just sit and let it cook. I can give it to a letting agent, a tried and trusted one, and I can just get on with my career, get on with my life, and knowing it's a really nice feeling to know that you've put some money into something and it's just sitting there and cooking and gradually making money. Of course, property prices go up and down. You can see by looking at this, there are dips. But in general, when you have a long-term view, they go up. If you think that you're going to invest and you might need to get your money back in a year or 2 or 3 years, do not get involved in this because you will lose. The cost of buying and selling, the cost of stamp duty and stuff like that, having a 2 or 3 year period isn't enough to give yourself the buffer. You need to be looking at this long term by looking at the graph like you can see. If you buy a property for 200,000 and it goes up to 400,000, well, you know that with all the taxes and all the charges, you're going to come out significantly on top. And that's fortunately what's happened to me, because I've been in for a long time. I've been in for 35, 40 years. So, of course, my gains have been just outrageously good. Right, the one on the right-hand side, basically what this is saying is landlords are becoming more sophisticated. So the big, what's it, skyscraper, if that's the right word, the big column, that's the word I'm looking for. The big column on the right-hand side is almost 50% of landlords now in the market have got 5 properties or more. The world changed after the financial crash in 2008. The city centres that used to be just for retail and banking and some leisure became the places for people wanting to live. They wanted to live and work. The millennials, the new, the youngsters coming through, they didn't want to sit on a motorway for an hour and all the rest of it. And so city centres and town centres became residential places, which was never the case in the past. And of course, in the UK, we were always told to rent is dead money. You've got to buy and own your own house and pay a mortgage. But of course, after the financial crash, when 100% mortgages disappeared and people couldn't afford a £50,000 deposit to buy an apartment, they had to rent. And it's taken something like 20 years or 15 years for that culture to completely change. And now it's acceptable to rent. You know, all the kids who go to university, they're just renting when they come out of halls. And the young professionals who start their jobs, they're renting. 80% of people in city centres now in the UK are renting. They're not home owners. And so the demand for this has become greater. And the British government wanted the landlords. We used to have a nation of landlords with one apartment. And the government wanted the landlords to become more forward-thinking, more responsible, to look after the tenants, provide nicer apartments, maintain them, etc., because of our culture change. And so they brought in tax advantages for people to have limited companies and get better tax relief on their portfolio. And that's why we see that column on the right-hand side grow. More people are now building a portfolio. When I say a portfolio, just 5 apartments, depending on how ambitious you are, but 5 apartments should get you something like £1 to £1.5 million of passive income, a pot of passive income over a 15, 20-year period. And we'll talk about that in a minute. What's the next one? Right, market research. Well, for me, it's all about the tenant and of course the developer. So after I've made myself feel comfortable with the developer, he's not going to lose my money, and it's going to be a nice quality apartment. I want to then know about who the tenants are. I want to see what what they look like, what their background is, etc. And in general, we're talking about young professionals. We're talking about management who live in the town centres, city centres with disposable income. That's what we're looking for. And of course, it can come. You can find out how many jobs there are and what the retention is for the students in the universities and how many students there are. The main cities in the UKs and the main towns they've all got good stories as far as this market research is concerned. Location, for me, it's a key thing. Once you've got your apartment, it's all about location. Imagine having each apartment, let's just say you've got, I don't know, £1,500 a month going out and £1,500 coming in. So you've got rent of £1,500 and your mortgage is £1,000, you've got service charge, insurance and letting fee, etc. And there you go, it's covered, it's washed its face, and you're going to sit there and just let that cook. So you've got a £200,000 apartment, and if you can keep it like that for 15, 20 years, it'll be worth 400. Wonderful. Imagine if it was empty because you hadn't got the right location and there weren't the right people, the right tenants to let it out. So that's £1,500 going out, but you've got no money coming in. And imagine if you then bought 3 or 4 of these. And so suddenly you're underwater for £6,000 a month and you have no idea when that's going to stop. Where are these tenants coming from? It's only happened to me once, and that was when there was a leak in the apartment above me, and it completely flooded my apartment, and it was 6 months before I could get it repaired, and I hadn't got insurance, and so it was empty. And as a young man, where I was kind of living on the breadline, and every penny counted, it was scary. I really didn't enjoy that, so I made sure that I insured against that in the future. But location matters because you need sustainable tenant demand. Know the numbers. I've just spoke about that. The numbers are right. What's my stamp duty? I want to know exactly what my deposit is, the actual deposit amount, the stamp duty and the fees to buy, the legal fees, etc. Once I've taken delivery, how much is my mortgage going to be, service charge, etc. Ground rent, it's only peppercorn these days. I want to know how much money is going out, and I want to see what the market is and how much rent's coming in. And then if I've got to pay 10%, if I've got £1,500 coming in, but I've got to pay 10% to the letting agent, that's actually £1,350, etc. So just know those numbers. They're fairly straightforward. Make sure you're getting into something that you understand, and hopefully it washes its face, as I say. Financing options. The beautiful thing about property, which is why I chose property and not stocks and shares or private equity or other more complicated investment routes, is because you can mortgage property. That's what's lovely about it. You can leverage. I can buy a £200,000 property and just put 50,000 down and get the rent to pay the mortgage, while it sits there and gains in value over the years. Joseph Mews and any good agent, they'll have partnerships with mortgage brokers and get you the best mortgages when the time comes to complete. I feel like I'm going on. Forgive me if I am. What's the next one? I'll keep it short. Oh God, look at all these. Look, I guess where's the UK property market headed? Look, who knows what's in the future? There's wars and there's financial crises and there's all sorts of things that can help. We've recently had inflation and interest rate rises, etc. There's lots of things that can happen. Property in general is cyclical. It used to be 10 years. People talk about, oh, I'm going to wait. I've heard people say to me in the past, I'm going to wait to invest. I think prices are going to come down. Well, you just go crazy doing that. You just sit and wait. Is this the right time? I don't know. The right time to invest, if you're in for the long term, is when you've got the money. When you've got disposable income, enough to put a deposit down and buy an apartment, that's the time to buy. If you're in this for 10 or 15 years, which you should be, as I said before, don't get involved if it's going to be for 2 or 3, you'll lose money. If you're in this for the long term, well, it doesn't matter if you buy at the top of the cycle or the bottom, because you're still going to double the value of your apartment. And if you end up spending the money on something else and you don't invest it, you can regret it. I've made those mistakes in the past. Let me tell you a quick story. As a young man, there was a 1-bedroom apartment in Birmingham, £88,000. And my friend, it was off plan, first one ever in Birmingham. And my friend told me about it in the pub. He said, I've just bought this apartment, 88,000. I said, oh, great. Where is it? I'll go and get one. So I went, and it was 100% mortgage. So I went to the developer a few days later, and he said, yeah, we've sold the first phase. He said, you can have the one next door to your friend, but it's £110,000. And he paid 88. So it was 25% more. It was another 22,000 on top. And I was absolutely mortified. I thought, oh God, I've missed it. And I was umming and ahhing. Well, today that apartment's worth 325,000, and I paid 110 through gritted teeth. But I've got £200,000 worth of equity in that apartment. It's never been, there's never been a void. It's right in the middle of Birmingham city centre, with everything that's gone around it over these 30 odd years. It's never been unlet. And so I paid at the time way over the top for that apartment compared to my friend. But I've got £200,000 worth of equity in it, and I wish that I bought 10 of them. And so that's my point about worrying about timing and what's going on in the future. If you get the right developer, get a quality apartment in the right location that will always rent, and just sit and let it cook. None of this matters then. We're going to have highs and lows. Sometimes, let's just imagine you're semi-retired in the future, or you want to retire, and suddenly the world market conditions mean that the prices, you bought your apartment 20 years ago for 200,000, it's worth 400, and suddenly it's worth 325 because there's been a huge dip because there's something going on in the world. You just have to wait. When those unfortunate time comes, it might be a couple of years, but you just have to wait. It might be that in 10, 20 years time, it's all booming and it's perfect and it's nice and easy. That's the same with any investment. That's not just property. So the old saying is, it's not timing the market, it's time in the market. If you sit in for 15 years, you're going to be absolutely fine. For what it's worth, I believe, in particular in the UK, because of the inflation, which was soaring, and the interest rates had to come up from 0.1 to 5.5 or whatever it is, this has slowed things right down. And the only boom in apartments and property in the UK over the past 3 years has been the build to rent stuff. And this is the more expensive apartments that with all the amenities. We can't invest in them. They're owned by pension funds. And so our market's slowed down. It's gone through a slow period. Having said that, there are the right properties, like Johnny spoke about Lockside Wharf earlier. That's been an outstanding success. So there are places, there are different pockets that you can invest in that still do well. I guess my main point is, I believe, it's only a personal belief, that come 25, as interest rates start coming down in the UK, and we all believe they will, in the summer they'll start to slowly reduce. I can see a boom coming next year. There's a lot of developments that have been purchased over the last 4 or 5 years, and developers have just sat on them waiting for the moment. And so I can see prices starting to increase significantly again next year. But that's just my opinion. It's better for me to go on like that, tell that story, than go through all these. Okay, what's the next one? Oh, right, here we go. So this is where you get involved. So we're going to ask you a question and just click on, there it is. If you can just click on one of those, what's your biggest concern about starting to build a UK property portfolio, apart from listening to me? Here we go. Financing and upfront costs, finding the right properties, managing rental properties, understanding legal and tax implications. Be interesting for us to know what that is, because we're here to help. That's the idea. All right, then. Thanks, Sanj. What's the next one? Oh, have we got more? Yeah, it's another one. What is your... Oh, is this the answers? Is this it? What's your biggest concern? Oh, there you go. Right. Okay, so 42% is just marginally ahead. Understanding legal and tax implications. Well, I can understand that, because that was me in the beginning. It was all a minefield. But we go through all of that with you. We've got a panel of lawyers who represent you. We've negotiated a lower fee, so you get charged a fraction of what you'd pay if you just rocked up on the high street. And they tell you all about that. If you're a foreign investor, if you're from the UK, there's all different positions. They'll tell you about whether to set up a limited company or to buy it in your own name, or in a different way. You get all, and this doesn't cost you anything. This is all free advice. The second one that was just behind there, 37% of you said financing and upfront costs. Of course, that's more important today. You could get 2% mortgage fees not long ago. Just cleared it, Charles, thanks. And now the interest rates have gone up, so you've got to make sure you get the right mortgage deal. And as I say, we've got mortgage brokers who can help you do all of this and explain all the costs. And then a low one, 21% was finding the right properties. So nobody was worried about managing rental properties. So finding the right properties. Well, again, if you look at our portfolio and what we've done over the years, hopefully that will give you some comfort. We've got 2 or 3 really good developments that we're about to launch in the next couple of months as well. Right. Well, I hope that's okay. Let's go on to the next one. The 4 pillars of building a property empire. We may be going over, old ground. Look, you've got to decide to start somewhere. That's what I did as a young man. I understood property. It was simple bricks and mortar. Scale is obviously getting more than one and getting as many as you can, or whatever goal you set yourself. I wanted to get 5. I ended up getting more than 30 in the end. But as a young man, I just wanted to get 5. Sustainability, this is your tenant demand. You've got to have something that's an apartment that's going to last a long time, and also that's always going to be let. And then, of course, at the end, you may choose to sell. I've sold half of my portfolio, and I've kept the other half for the rent, for passive income. But you may just go for the rental income. Interesting thought here. An investor once told me about the importance of a dividend. So what's a dividend? Dividend is you make an investment and you've got an asset. So it might be stocks and shares, or it might be a property. And that asset is going up in value over time. The value of it is rising, hopefully. But also the dividend is where you get some money, some income as you go along. So if you buy a particular stock or a share, hopefully the value goes up over years, but also you might get a 5% dividend each year. This is how stocks and shares work. Well, in property, that dividend is rent. So not only is your property going up in value, that's the idea, if you're in for the long term, but you're receiving rent if you choose the right location. And the rent pays the costs to own the property. And this is the deal. If you don't get any rent, if you don't get a dividend, if it's just like buying something that goes up and down in value, like, I don't know, a bet on the horses or crypto or go to the casino, it's just a bet, isn't it? And I know all investments are some kind of gamble, but this is, for me, this was a much safer gamble. I felt much more comfortable with this. a proven technique over the years, and it's worked for me. Okay, next one. How to build a property empire. It's a big world, a property empire in 5 years. Right, come on, let's have a look at it. It's nice and simple. That basically, this is talking about buying 5 apartments. So if you look at, say, a 200 grand apartment and you put 50,000, this is really basic, like the back of a cigarette packet stuff. But if you buy a £200,000 apartment and you get a 75% loan mortgage, 150 grand, you need 50 grand cash to put down to buy that apartment. You can have a mortgage 175. Your rent will cover the mortgage and the costs. That's the idea. That's what you're looking for. And then you just sit there and let it cook. So in year 1, you do that. And in year 2, you can put down your second deposit, and so on and so forth. Year 3, the same. So you invest £50,000 a year for 5 years, which is 250 grand investment, plus the cost to buy. You've now bought 5 apartments worth £200,000. So your portfolio is worth £1 million. Now, if you keep them 15 years, that £1 million is worth £2 million. Here's an example of just one apartment. So your 200 grand apartment becomes 400 grand over 15 years. If you've got 5 of them, that means your £1 million becomes £2 million. Now, remember, in the £2 million, you've got 250 grand deposit in there that you put down, but you've made £1 million equity. The value's gone from 1 million to 2 million. In the 1 million is your 250 grand, it's your deposit. But in the 2 million, you've got 1 million equity. So you've actually end up with 1.25 million. So this here explains what I've just said. Your mortgage doesn't go down. You have an interest-only mortgage. Back in the day, you could have you could have repayment mortgages as well as the interest, and the rent would cover it, but not today with these interest rates. So you only want an interest-only mortgage, which means that all of the costs is covered by the rent. So that stays at 150. If you look at the bottom, year 15, the 150 stays at 150 at all time. You just pay the interest as you go along. Your 50 grand stays, your deposit. But look, you've made £200,000 growth over 15 years. If you've got 5 of them, you've got 5 times 200, which is £1 million, plus your deposit, 1.25 million. Now, if you put that into some kind of plan that gave you a 10% return, you get £10,000 a month passive income for the rest of your life. And that's what this is all about. That's why I got involved, and mine has worked for me. But mine has worked for me because I chose the right places. And also, I've been in it I was a young man. I was 20 when I started investing. And so that's almost 40 years. Well, it is 40 years. Right, next one. Build your UK property without right. I think that's me. It's back over to you then, Johnny. Well, I hope that was useful, everybody, and I'll see you for the Q&A at the end. Thanks, Johnny.
Perfect. Thanks a lot, Andy. Yeah, some I know really useful stuff there. And we've got a few questions, so we're going to go over them shortly. So I'll bring Andy back on to answer those. I thought it would just be useful. Andy's obviously mentioned we've got a couple of new launches in the next couple of months. We've also got a couple of developments that we're obviously selling at the moment. So if we just go through very quickly. Look, Andy sort of touched on this, that it's about city centre, it's about or areas of regeneration that we know we're going to have consistent demand. In order to achieve what we've talked about achieving, you need to constantly rent your property. And the UK is in a fabulous position for that at the moment, because there quite frankly isn't enough, there aren't enough homes. We're told that we're going to be 600,000 homes short by the end of 2026, which is remarkable when you think about it, over 500,000 homes short. So there's 25 people to one apartment, they're telling us. So you're constantly going to rent, but you can really, through any market, through undersupply, oversupply, you're always going to have demand in the best locations. And this is something we focus on. So this is a property we're doing in partnership with Knight Frank. This is bang in the city centre of Birmingham, the best location within the city centre. It's been an incredible success. It's coming up to completion now in August. It's not a huge amount remaining in here, but a fantastic option that we can obviously send more info on. If you go to the next slide. Again, this is the finish. Everything that we build, by the way, and again, sort of reiterating on what we're talking about today, about who we're appealing to. You know, Andy obviously talked about the fact that who's going to be renting my apartment? Where's the demand coming from? We don't build student accommodation. We don't build what you would even class as first-time renters accommodation. We build to more of a sophisticated market. That's what the target that we want. Why? Because again, with exceptions, they tend to treat the property with a bit more respect, and the higher quality that you get, you obviously have that exit. And when we're looking at this over a 15, 20-year period, you need to ensure that you have that quality and you have the right people living in there. So we always build, this is an example, it has a yoga studio, Peloton gym, cafe, residence lounge, roof terrace. It has all of these amazing amenities. Again, really highlighting it is the best, or one of the best developments in the UK's second city, which is Birmingham. Next slide, please. Again, these are real photos of the development, and we can send more over. If you go to the next slide. Highlighting the location here for those of you that do or don't know Birmingham, it's pretty self-explanatory. Where you see Settle, that's obviously the development. You see St Paul's Square, which is one of the nicest, if not the nicest location in Birmingham city centre. It's where our office is actually, and that's 100 metres from there. But then if you look down to further south, you'll see Cornwall Street, Colmore Row, Paradise Birmingham is where HSBC's headquarters are. This is bang in the city centre of Birmingham. So you're a moment's walk away from thousands of jobs, headquarters of HSBC, Deutsche Bank, all of these big businesses are 150, 200 metres away from the site. And then to the north, you've got the nicest location in the city centre. So again, really just sort of focusing on the best spots within the city. Next slide, please. Again, this is in Manchester. So if we go to the next slide, this is a development called Osborne Yard. Again, really nice area of Manchester. You'll notice that the prices are relatively similar. We kind of stick to this kind of price point. Why? Because obviously the lower the capital value, the higher the yield. You can achieve exactly the model that we're looking to achieve, which Andy's spoken about, and we've had a few questions on, about taking a 75% mortgage and using your tenant to offset that mortgage. The only way that you can do that is obviously by achieving a certain rental yield. And here we're looking at 6% with a price starting from 250. So again, if you go to the next slide, proven developer. They've built 14 developments in Manchester already. Again, appealing to that professional tenant. They've got really lovely terraces, a communal terrace and residence garden. And again, walking distance from all the jobs and big demand. If we keep going to the next slide, please. Again, obviously, I don't want to go into too much detail in all of these. So if you do want information, please just ask and we'll send them over. I think finally, we've got a new commuter area of Birmingham that we've launched a project. This is about 15 minutes outside of the city centre of Five Ways, and then 20 minutes into Birmingham New Street, which is the central location. Lower price point, as you can see, which offers something slightly different. But again, this is part of a £1.1 billion regeneration. It's in partnership with St Modwen, who are one of the UK's biggest builders. They're owned by Blackstone now, $3 trillion company. You know you can rely on them. Again, we already spoke about this. Do I trust the developer? Can I rely on them? Well, with St Modwen, they're one of the UK's biggest builders, so absolutely you can. Again, this completes in Q2 of next year. Amazing finish. Beautiful standards here, and again, amenity of the residence garden, balconies overlooking greenery, and importantly, surrounded by thousands of jobs. Not only is it close to the hospital, Queen Elizabeth, only 9 minutes away, which is the biggest employer in Birmingham. You're 17 minutes to Five Ways, where all the finance jobs are, but you've also got 10,000 jobs being built right on your doorstep in this area. So a really cool site, lower price points, and it allows you time to establish cash flow there because it's not complete until Q2 next year. Next slide, please. Right. So again, those are 3 examples. We are fairly diverse in our offering, as I'd mentioned before, and we can, any information you'd like on any of the developments, just ask. So Andy's back on, great. And we're going to go through some of the questions. We've had quite a few that have been to do with tax and how to structure this. And look, I know that there's people on this webinar from different locations, and the answer can be different dependent on where you're located. And to give you sort of, to put that into simpler terms, firstly, important to point out, we're not tax advisors. So obviously we can introduce you to the appropriate people to look into your specific situations. But one thing to remember, and I'm based overseas, Andy's obviously based in the UK, is that if you don't have any income in the UK already, so you're not living in the UK, you don't have any other properties, you don't have income yet, and you're looking to start buying property, and this will be your first income. The UK has double taxation agreements with 130 different countries. So the likelihood is that you will probably be part of that. What does that mean? Well, it means that even if you're not a British resident or passport holder or citizen, then you have access to this tax-free allowance. So it's £12,500, which means that up to that, you don't pay any income tax. Plus, if you have a partner and you put them on the contract as well, that doubles. So that means that up to £25,000, there is no income tax that you're paying, as long as you don't have any income tax in the UK. So when we're asked about structuring through a limited company or in your own personal name, if you're planning on building 3 or 4 properties, it actually makes more sense in your own personal name. Because why? Because when you set up a limited company, you're paying corporation tax, which is 19%. So whether it's £1,000, £12,000, £20,000, obviously you're paying that amount. So again, it's relative to where you're located and what income you're already earning in the UK. But again, obviously we can introduce you to the appropriate tax advisor that will give you more info on this. Is there anything you wanted to add on that, Andy?
Yeah, just that when all this changed, Johnny, and the government said, look, we're going to, we want more responsible landlords and we want to encourage landlords to start limited companies. So we're going to give you tax relief on your mortgage interest, etc. All of that made sense. The only thing is the mortgage side of the sector didn't follow suit. So if you're applying for a mortgage in your own name, you'll get a better deal, a better rate, a better loan to value because it's a personal mortgage than you will if you apply as a limited company. Because now applying as a limited company, it's what's called a commercial mortgage, where they want to offer you 50% loan to value or 60%. And so that might have changed. It's been a few years since I looked at that, but it's a moving picture. And the bottom line is you just take some advice, and we've got partners who'll give you that advice. And so, you'll find out before you invest, which is the best way for you. You can look at all the figures.
Yeah, we've had a few questions about how it looks, and we do cash flows, which are fantastic tools that are relative to you. So if you speak to a mortgage broker and a tax advisor and they say this is your best bet from a mortgage, you're going to have a 75% offering and your interest rate is going to be 5.5%. We plug that into a cash flow that's relative to that unit within that development, and it will give you a 15-year projection based on the debt that you've taken on and the income that's coming in for that apartment. So it's a really useful tool to use once you've whittled down what your options are. So again, you can ask for one of those, and obviously we can set them aside for you. So on the legal side of things, as I said, we can introduce you to those people, and it is just so relative to the individual. There's a question here that, Andy, I think will be good for you to answer. You started investing, what age were you when you bought your first
20.
apartment? 20, okay. Pretty early.
100% mortgages. In fact, they then went to 105. They said you can have all the money to buy the apartment and we'll give you 5% extra so you can buy furniture for the apartment. That's what it was like in the 80s. Yeah.
Easier days. Well, we have a question here from anonymous attendee saying, if you have time on your side, e.g. you're in your early 20s or early 30s, can you afford to overpay now and simply extend your time horizon? What should younger investors look out for?
What do you mean, overpay to get the mortgage paid off quicker?
I imagine that's what they're referring to.
Yeah. I mean, look, for me, leverage as much as you can, because the more you can leverage, the more, if you're going to be in it for 15 years and you're looking for a capital increase in value, the more apartments you can buy, the bigger your pot's going to be. That would be for me. I'd try and borrow. I mean, I had back in the day, there was a couple of friends that I knew that did it much better than I did. They managed to go and get some funding. I wasn't that sophisticated. They went to a bank and said, look, I want to build a portfolio of 100 apartments. And the bank gave them funding. And oh my goodness, the money it's literally millions and millions of what they've got. Imagine 40 years on having 100 apartments. And so if I had my time again, I'd get as much leverage funding as I could and buy as many as I could. Obviously, there's risks, because if they're voids, you're just underwater and you can't afford to pay. But if you buy right in the middle, or where all the jobs or the tenant demand is, you're going to be fine.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, talking it from my experience, who is in his early slash mid 30s, having bought a couple of properties, for me, as Andy said earlier, having the interest only mortgage as an option, taking as much leverage as I can, knowing that that's washing its face in the background. And what's important to me is that that value is going up, but I'm not having to do anything about it. The more the rental comes into my account and the mortgage comes out of the same account, and that's possible even with the maximum mortgage, which was 75% for me. And I'm just going to let that keep going. And any equity that I can take is going to be to build and to scale for the reasons that we've talked about today. So I think not overpaying and actually using time on your side is probably the smartest move, and what I would recommend.
When I remember being that young man, I remember, it's a worrying thing. It's all right for me. I've been doing this for 40 years. So I'm saying, yeah, you should do this and leverage as much as you can. But if you haven't done this before and you think, goodness, I'm going to put 50,000 into this plus the costs and say if it doesn't rent, etc. What I would do is I would pick up the phone and speak to a couple of letting agents of wherever. If I'm going to invest in Birmingham or Manchester, and I would say, tell me what where rents and what the market's like, and etc. And that would give me the comfort, because we all know what answer you get. They'd say, my goodness, as soon as the apartments come on, they're gone in a day. We've got 10 people queuing to and of course that's the market today, and it can change. But in general, as you said, Johnny, we've never in the UK been able to build houses quick enough to meet the demand. And this is why the prices just keep going up. And you know what? Ever since I was a boy, the government's always promised, yeah, we're going to get the housing problem sorted. And they never have. Not for 40 years that they've been able, because it's not a government, it's private sector. It's not the public sector. And so it's down to developers that they'll give planning and they'll sell the land. They'll even release some of the green belt. But unless it's right for the developer to build them, they won't build them. And so they have no.
And it's a compounding problem. I mean, they're saying it's going to go on for 50 years more than where we are now, because every year we're not hitting the target of what they say, which I think is 340 that we need, 340,000 we need to build, and we're building 200 at a push. So yeah, it's getting worse and worse each year.
Yeah.
So one, I've spoken to you about this before, Andy, is a question about service charges. So how do you deal with the managing agent or freeholder increasing the service charge year on year? I'm hesitant owning apartments for this reason alone. Many developers overcharge service fee, and once you've bought, you're stuck.
Yeah. So this is how it works. The freeholder, the only interest for the freeholder after he's taken the money from the sales is the ground rent. He doesn't get anything else. The service charge has got nothing to do with him. The service charge is the leaseholders, us, the people who have bought the apartments. Now, we don't want to do that work ourselves. If I'm a pilot or a doctor or whatever I do, an engineer, the last thing I want to be doing is getting involved with my apartment. And so we appoint a service agent company, and they're normally estate agents or letting agents. And actually, it's a thankless task. The idea is, or the rumor is, that these guys put it all up and make loads of money. No, they don't. I know I wouldn't want to do it. It's all governed by the ALA, by the
Ombudsman.
the estate agent compliance in the UK. So they have to work within certain parameters, and they can't charge more than 10% of the whole thing. Anyway, somebody has got to do the insurance and the fire and all the communal spaces and the electricity in the lampposts outside and the gardens and anything that's communal, the roof of the building, etc. And so they've got to collect all that money in. Now, not every landlord or leaseholder pays the money, so that's a challenge in itself. And then they've got to manage the place, and when the lifts break down, they've got to get those fixed, etc. And so someone has to do that, and it protects our asset. We don't want it to be scrimped and saved and cut corners. We want everything to be done properly, because when we do want to sell in 10, 15, 20 years, we want it all to be in a good condition. We don't want it to be in a state of dilapidation. So the service charge is a good thing. We just need to understand how much it is. And before a development even starts, an off-plan development, the actual plan is put in place. All of the estimates are put in place by the local agents, etc. And so we know what it is. And as a rule of thumb, it's 1%. So if you buy a £200,000 apartment, it's 2,000. That's a rule of thumb, and that gives enough income for the development to pay for everything and keep it in tip-top condition. So
And
2,000,
also,
what's that? About £1,500 a month? Sorry, £150 a
yeah,
month. So you
yeah,
allow
yeah.
into you for the cost for your rent to be paid.
And
For
also, I know with the management companies that do this, that if they can't justify why they've increased the service charges, then they get in trouble. They get struck off that development, and it's governed that way. So there needs to be proof of why they're justifying it.
It's the worst thing. There's the ombudsman. There's a procedure that you do to put a complaint in to say they're not doing it properly, and it goes to the ombudsman. And if they're found guilty of mismanagement, it's the worst thing. It's like being sent off as a footballer or being struck off as a lawyer. You know, their reputation is shot, and so very rare that happens. What normally happens, Johnny, is that your service charge is £150 a month, and suddenly it goes up to 180, and it's like, and they don't understand, they don't ask to see the full report, and they just assume, oh, you're ripping us off, etc. And I understand that, but you can ask for the full report of the whole of the service charge for the whole development, and it's transparent, it's in the public domain, and you can see that. And you can talk to them and say, why the lifts, last year it was 24,000, this year it's 60,000. Why is that? And they'll tell you why. And
It
then
tends to go up with inflation as well with RPI, right? So it's kind of it can be justified that way. So yeah, it's all incredibly transparent, as you say, which I know, in having lived in some of those markets, other markets, that's not the case. So you do have full transparency there, and you're not suddenly going to be within a huge shock that that can't be justified. And again, it's all within your interest here to make the communal areas and it more appealing for both renters and buyers.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so do you have any already done projects to sell from Juliana? Yeah, we do. We've got a couple of developments that are completed and tenanted. So we like to, again, offer variety to our clients. We have properties that are like the one in Birmingham, which is completing now. So that is completing in the next couple of months. So by the time you go through the process, it will already be ready. We have properties that are complete in 12 to 18 months time. And then we also have developments that are ready today that have tenants in them. You're buying something that is already achieving a yield. So again, if you want some more info on that, just ask and we'll send them over. Good question about better to spread your risk across different areas in the UK or a couple in better located areas. So would you buy 2 in Settle, or would you buy 1 in Settle and 1 in Manchester? I know, Andy, you've been quite focused on Birmingham, but what would your advice be there?
Yeah, look, as long as it's the right developer, it's a good builder, and it's the right location for sustainable tenant demand. You can buy them all in one place. I bought 10 apartments in one development, and I've also spread them around. The reason why I just kept to Birmingham is I'm from Birmingham, and I just felt that if there was a problem, it was closer to me. But I soon realised it doesn't matter where it is, because you don't have to do anything. You give it to a letting agent, and as long as you buy in a development that's got service charge, it's all done for you. Something else that I learned quite a long time ago. I was thinking, shall I just buy a house, a freehold house where I haven't got service charge, no ground rent, I own it, and it's a lot less and I did that. I bought it with a friend, and we owned it jointly. The only thing is, when the fence blew down, we had to go and fix the fence. We didn't have any service charge, but we had to fix the fence. And when the few roof tiles, we had to do that and bits and bobs. And what I learned, the outcome of this, is that you pay the same amount, whether it's freehold or leasehold. You're still going to pay £2,000 a year. But if it's an apartment, they do it, and you can just, as I say, sit and let it cook and carry on with your life. And if it's freehold, you have to do it yourself. And so I never bought any more houses, and I only invested in apartments.
Yeah, it's a question we get a lot. It's interesting when we've been doing this for a while, and when we went to the market with houses, we actually had very little appetite. That the majority of our investors all want apartments, and I guess it's for that reason. A question, I'm conscious of time. We'll wrap it up at an hour, which is in 4 minutes. Lauren has asked about purchasing in London. Why Manchester, Birmingham preferred for investments? Well, firstly, from my side, what we talked about is how we achieve that positive cash flow, right? And the way that you do that is by having a yield high enough that you can offset your payments, right? This is about paying off your debt with somebody else's money. London's a fantastic location. It's where I'm from. It's always going to be a strong investment for you. But when you're looking at scaling and leveraging as much as you can and offsetting that debt, it's impossible in central London. Why? Because your yield is probably 2%. And so when you have such a low yield, and as an overseas investor or as a buy-to-let investor, your interest rate is, even if it was 3.5, 4, but going up to 5.5%, it doesn't work. You're in negative cash flow. And there also isn't that scope. The UK has been evolving, and it has evolved particularly over the last 10 years, with Manchester getting a lot of exposure. Birmingham is now going through huge regeneration. Every time I travel back, there's a new crane and something else being built. And it's becoming more London focused, the UK. We had HSBC famously move their headquarters from Canary Wharf to Birmingham. That was a huge sign of intent, a massive news that nobody expected. Since then, Deutsche Bank have expanded 2,000 staff. KPMG, PwC, all of the financial services sector is booming in Birmingham. Why? Well, it's cheaper for them to be there. The cost of living for the director who's 30 years old, earning a good salary in London, still can't live anywhere near his office and still has to take 2 tubes to get to work. Whereas in Birmingham, he can afford to live in the centre and walk to work. And so it's becoming more attractive. These second cities, Birmingham and Manchester, are becoming more attractive both commercially, but as a consumer as well. And so when we look at Birmingham as an example, the financial services sector are the highest earners in the UK, and that is the market that is moving drastically to Birmingham. And so you have these opportunities, you have a higher rental yield, but you also have more room for growth. You're talking about Settle, the prices there were starting at 250. That is an incredible development from a huge developer in the heart of the city centre. If you wanted to buy the equivalent heart of the city centre, amazing developer in the centre of London, 2 million, not 250,000. So you're looking at your ceiling and where's my room for growth, but also what's the buying power? Buying power is strong because of the demographic, and it started at 250 with a 6% yield. And that's why from investment and from scaling and from leveraging, it makes so much more sense in these locations. Never going to knock London. Absolutely love the place and great investment location. But in terms of scaling and doing what we're talking about here, it makes a lot more sense.
Just to add to that, Johnny, the reason why the yield is so low in London is because, like most capital cities around the world, there's international demand for London. And so the prices are just so high. But we talk about the yield, which is the dividend, which is the income, the rental income. The prices are so high, but the tenants, they're not the landlords. They're not the people with £1 million, £2 million to buy an apartment. They can't afford £10,000 a month, £20,000 a month, which would give you a 5 or 6% yield. They can only afford 3 or 4. It's still a lot of money. And so that's why the yields historically in London have been 1 to 2%. And unless the rents can be 10,000 or 20,000 a month, which I can't see happening, they'll always be low yields. And that's why it's so young. Yeah.
I've had many times over the years living overseas where clients have said to me, I want to buy a property in London and it's, £1 million or 800,000. And then they've ended up being able to buy 3 properties and spread their risk and spread their locations and start building a portfolio that a minute ago they were just going to put into one property that was yielding 3%. And now they've got 3 that are yielding 6 with more room for growth. So, but again, look, if you're thinking of using it, there's obviously different factors, but that tends to be the advice. Yeah. Right, we're bang on, 3 o'clock where I am, and I guess 12 o'clock where you are, Andy. And so I think we've got a couple more, but I think they're along the same lines of what we've answered tax-wise. And as I said, if you want any information from both mortgages, tax advice, as well as obviously information on the properties, if you'd like to book in a one-on-one consultation with either the mortgage broker or myself or one of the sales advisors around the world, one of these gentlemen, then please do just get in touch and let us know. You'll all receive an email from us shortly. And thank you all for joining today. And Andy, mainly thank you to you for coming on.
Thanks, Johnny.
Thanks, guys.